So psychics are ones that are usually like past, present, future, the now, kind of giving you those examples, like when we look into the future, like where you're headed. And that's a vibrational energy, right? So in the moment, you're going to pick up on the energy of where that person is. A psychic's going to do that. They may pick up on past life energy. They may pick up on, hey, this is the path that you're heading towards. But the beauty of that is that that's spirit or the energy giving you that direction, but that also is a guidance, and guidance isn't always something you have to take. So I want to be very clear about that. Just because somebody says this is what's going to happen, yeah, you're on that path, but if you don't like that path, now you've been made aware. Now you can shift the energy. Now, that being said, mediumship is more about connecting to loved ones or spirits on the other side. And what I mean by that is the other side of the veil, the other side. It could be source, creator, God, heaven, hell, whatever you want to I don't know, we're bring it all in, right? Somebody who isn't here in the physical body form, and they connect to those people.
To a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Andrea, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I was debating if I should roll the R's or maybe I should just say it regularly.
No, it's always so sexy when somebody rolls the R's. It's like the beauty of like accents, right? Is that we can just like make it just makes it sound sexy and magical.
I appreciate you coming on. You know, you have an very interesting background, and yeah, I'd love for you to maybe start us off for those who may not be familiar with your work, the nurse medium. How'd you come up with the term?
So I've been a nurse a really long time. I've worked in like so many different aspects of nursing, and I really truly feel that nursing is what brought me into this like extended or advanced healing space. Because, you know, obviously caring for people is such a big thing, but in nursing, we also get to see a lot of death and dying. And I say get to see as in that's like a big honor, right? So the nurse medium, even though I hold a doctor term, it confuses the heck out of people. But again, just being the nurse medium, it really fit because nursing has that intimacy about it, right? And that connection and that healing. So does medium, like the doctor part of it, but there's already a doc medium. So we kept the nurse medium, but yeah, no, definitely being a nurse has been such a blessing and an honor to kind of help people to the other side too, which again, is such an honor.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about your life and your experiences. Like I've said, there's my friend, this psychic paramedic, and I think you guys would really connect. And, you know, my brother-in-law, when we were younger, he got shot in the head and died, and she was working in Compton, California as a paramedic, and she's from Montana, but around the same area where I grew up. And yeah, it was just, those were some hard times back in the 90s when people were doing a lot of drive-bys in that area. But yeah, it was just so, I've just always been fascinated with this type of, these topics, even before my awakening.
I love that. I love it.
Often in religion, you hear that's devil stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you look at your work? Do you feel it's more your abilities, and is it more of a gift and responsibility? Because a lot of times we're taught that that's devil stuff. You can't tap into that stuff. It's demons and Satan, you know, a lot of times. And I've had some readings where even messages from my brother-in-law to his daughter, and then I have a relative say that's devil stuff, and next you know it's cut off. Those experiences.
For sure. And you know, here's the thing is like all different cultures, all different religions, like we're all going to have different belief systems. Now, I can only speak for myself, right? And I grew up in a family that like mom was Catholic, dad was Jewish, and then mom decided to take me to all these like different experiences. but we were never allowed to tell dad. um, from like pagan festivals too. So I really have a wealth of knowledge about different religion, which I'm so blessed to have. And even working in nursing, we have to know a lot about different religions and cultures. It's a benefit to who we care for. But yes, I definitely I've received plenty of hate mail
Wow.
in regards to what I do. But we have to remember like that we all have different belief systems. And if that's their belief system, then I respect that. Like if that's not what they want to tap into, I always tell people just be kind. Like that's all
Mm,
we have to do at the end of the day. We just have to be kind to one another. We don't have to believe in all the things. When this does happen, I tend to want to know why. Like, I'll usually say, "Okay, tell me your belief systems. Why do you feel that way? Or are you open to sharing that with me? Because maybe I can learn something from that." Because we do look at the other side and there's a lot of different things that we do. So typically, let's say I'm doing a big gallery event. Maybe there's 20 people, 100 people. Most of us are there to get that connection again,
mm,
right? I call in angelic guides. I call in my loved ones that have crossed over. I call in the protection first. I'm really connected to Archangel Michael. I'm a big believer in that. Do I pray? Yeah. I mean, there's like maybe I do mantras. I do a lot of different things. I kind of take from everything and put it in one basket. But what I usually tell people is like when we go to, we'll just use church as an example. I'm not picking out anybody in particular, but I'm just saying let's just use church. We're going to the Catholic Church. We're praying. We're calling in angels. We're calling in God. Well, to me, our loved ones that have crossed over, we can have beautiful relationships with them that can continue the healing journey, that they can be there for that protection. And for me, it's always about a frequency too. Now, that being said, I like to live in the higher frequency. Who doesn't, right? That's happy, go lucky, all those things. But then there's those moments where you do have to dive into what may feel like a heavier frequency. I don't want to call it dark or evil or any of that. But I'll give an example. I did a reading recently, and I won't share the whole reading with anybody for their, because it's very personal and intimate. But this person had met with somebody, like was encountered with somebody who is a serial killer.
mm,
And that energy feels very different when they come in. But we also have some control over that. And to me, it's by praying, by making sure that we have that higher power that's with us, that protection energy. Now, does it feel dark and heavy and icky? Yeah, it did. Definitely did. But we also have control over energy. So we don't want that energy there. We have to learn, how do we protect ourselves? How do we control that energy? How do we eliminate it if we don't want it there anymore? Now, is it devil stuff? Well, I've seen some pretty dark things. I have. I've done a lot of work, with cold cases and such. And that is heavy stuff.
mm.
But I have also experienced some very negative energies. I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, and there's a lot of heavy history there. I actually went to Jerome. There's a lot of heavy history
Mm,
there too. There's a lot of heavy history basically anywhere if you're looking for it. But it's really, how do you want to tap into it? So the beauty of like how I grew up was, understanding all of these different cultures or religions. There's some things that we can look into, like, well, what about Santeria or any of those things? It has the light and the dark. It's just a matter of where do you want to play?
mm.
That's my belief. Where do you want to play? Do I like to play there? No. Do I go there for like to help people if it's in a good way? I like to tend to go for the good outcome if that's possible. And even if you have to dive into some heavier spaces, but you're giving somebody some sort of closure, like then I feel like we're still doing the higher good.
Can I ask you a two-part question? Is there a difference between a psychic and a medium?
Mhm.
And when did you realize you had some of these abilities early
Mhm.
on?
So psychics are ones that are usually like past, present, future, the now, kind of giving you those examples, like when we look into the future, like where you're headed. And that's a vibrational energy, right? So in the moment, you're going to pick up on the energy of where that person is. A psychic's going to do that. They may pick up on past life energy. They may pick up on, hey, this is the path that you're heading towards. But the beauty of that is that that's spirit or the energy giving you that direction, but that also is a guidance. And guidance isn't always something you have to take. So I want to be very clear about that. Just because somebody says, this is what's going to happen. Yeah, you're on that path. But if you don't like that path, now you've been made aware. Now you can shift the energy. Now, that being said, mediumship is more about connecting to loved ones or spirits on the other side. And what I mean by that is the other side of the veil, the other side. It could be source, creator, God, heaven, hell, whatever you want to connect. I don't know. Bring it all in, right? Somebody who isn't here in the physical body form, and they connect to those people. And so when I will sit with a client, I actually had a big group gallery reading here, right behind that wall here. And there was like 20 something people. And one young lady says to me, I got to her and I kept hearing more about just messages of like where she's headed. And she said to me, she goes, I really don't have anybody that's crossed over. And I said, that's okay, because Spirit's still here to give you those answers. And maybe it's somebody that you didn't know. Maybe it was somebody who's a great, great, great grandparent. And yet they're still here. Sometimes they'll give me their name and their message. And then other times it's just the message. It's just about, hey, like I want to do that. So I've always experienced these things. I would say I experienced most likely, just based off of like my human form, mediumship over the psychic abilities. Now, my mom, very psychic, but not a medium. She does not connect to people who crossed over, but she used to like freak out all my friends, and she'd be able to tell exactly like what their rooms looked like and what was going to happen in the future with like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or, but then it started to kind of come together, and I realized talking to spirit, whether it be a loved one that's crossed or spirit, whoever, it brings it in those guiding messages. So it's a matter of both, I would say.
Do you believe that we can have entity attachments?
Mm-hmm.
And have you worked with anybody with entity attachments?
I have. I usually resort to one of my dearest friends to help assist with that. But yes, and I've experienced it myself, where it felt heavy. There was, and I kept feeling like I was not myself. And I remember looking in the mirror once, gosh, this is probably 2017. And I remember looking in the mirror and like not even recognizing who this was. And it was just things that I wouldn't necessarily, like, were not part of me, or the things that I would do or the things that I would say. And I went to my dear friend and he was like, oh my gosh, have you talked, like know about attachments, and you have to be so careful with like what you do. And, and when we do mediumship or any work, even if it's just going to work, you go to like your 9-to-5 job, there's energy there. We could be at the grocery store and something jump, and we just feel all of a sudden you ever like go to the grocery store and you had the best day, and then all of a sudden you're like, why am I in the worst mood? Sometimes that's an energy attachment, because that's what it is. It's energy. It's an entity, but it's also an energy.
How does that even happen? Like, how can people be more aware or protect themselves from these entity attachments or energies?
I always say taking care of yourself. I mean, that self-love, when people talk like, oh, self-love, you got to self-love. No, you really do. You really do. Because when I'm a big believer in frequencies. And again, I know I talk a lot about energy, but frequency and energy, we can start and stop a heart and a brain, right? With an energy or a frequency, right? We can change the way we feel with sound bowls. That's an energy and a frequency. So I always have a routine, so to speak, like when I get up in the morning, how I go about things about my day. I have protection, a form of protection that works for me. Now that's going to be different for everybody. That's a practice, in my opinion. It's like, how do I protect myself from this happening? Well, when I do a big group read, that's a lot of different energies, and we open up that like energy portal. So you just don't know. You don't want things coming in. So making sure that what you're putting in your body, how are you opening the circle and closing the circle? Now, again, this can be different for every medium. This is just how I do it. And also understanding like closing that circle, maintaining that energy. If you're not feeling comfortable with the energy, creating boundaries. I'm a mental health provider, so I preach boundaries all day long, but that's so true for the spiritual world too. it's big. You have to have energetic boundaries with things if things don't feel right. So protecting myself. So I always call in again my guides. I am a believer in certain crystals. So I do happen to have those around a lot. I do believe in the energy of that and the power of those. But again, if somebody doesn't believe in the fact that, like, this rock right here, it looks like a rock, it's not going to have any power. It's no different
Mm.
than think of a sheriff's badge. Really, what does it do? It's there, but it's a form of power, right? The minute they put that badge on, they're in a control. They're in a sense of a power. Well, no different when you step into spirit in like that, right? Versus just like, hey. So you have to protect yourself and really, and doing that and think of it like that, just like a badge of honor doing that work.
I appreciate that. I love learning about addiction and alcoholism and entity attachment connection. Do all addicts or alcoholics have entity attachments? And a lot of times yeah, and it's just interesting to question. Um, because it almost feels like we become that hungry ghost that the Buddhists talk about, and we kind of lose that ability of choice once we're really deeply seated in that. But I also realize that there's trauma underneath the drink or the drug. There's always some form of trauma. And I love how you practice EMDR, which I
Mhm.
would love to learn more about. How do you define trauma?
Ooh, so trauma is going to be different for everybody. So I
Yeah.
don't care if you I always use this, stub your toe and you just can't get off so every day you walk by that same table and you're like, "Oh, I can't,
Mm.
I'm going to stub my toe." And then every time you think about it and it's on that loop, it's like being on a merry-go-round, right? Well, does that have something to do with a dark attachment? Well, maybe, because what if maybe you got that table at a antique store and something was attached to that and it became like attached to you and frightened you and jumped to your energy. Usually that happens when we're at a lower frequency, and it typically is like, so we're open. Like, let's say we just didn't get a good night's sleep. We're just feeling down and something is like really, it gives us that opening. It's like cracking open for something to come in. Now, big level traumas. I mean, a lot of people that know me know I work with a lot of first responders, human traffic victims, sexual attack victims. I mean, it doesn't matter like where it is. It's trauma, and some people may look at that as higher level trauma. We don't know. Trauma could be you were 4 and your dad raised his voice. And now every single time you're in a relationship moving forward, and you hear a tone change, whether it be with your boss, your intimate partner, that's traumatic. That too is trauma. But all that is that we hold the trauma back here. So it's like, think of all these little compartments. And let's say 8 years old, your dad was always telling you, like, you're not good enough. So now somebody at, your intimate partner comes in and all they're doing is saying something that feels off to them. And now you're like, I can never do enough. I'm not in the, oh my gosh, like all you're doing is picking a fight, right? That's trauma. But what we can do with the EMDR is rewire the brain. And it's such a simple modality. And now, is it a cure all for everything? No. You have to use a ton of different tools. Like, does EMDR work for a lot of great things? Yeah, but you also there's things you got to do with it, right? You got to still take care of yourself. You still have to do all these other things. So, what it really does is it activates there's earphones that go on. I use 2 modalities. There's multiple modalities you can use with EMDR. There's a light bar. There's hand paddles. I like to use 2 modalities instead of 1 if I can, if it's via remote, because I am licensed in almost all 50 states. But if
Mm.
you're doing it via remote, you really only have the earphones. And what we're doing is we're targeting a memory that's traumatic for the person. We're tying it to a core emotion and a core memory. So, for instance, you remember the Pixar movie, Inside Out?
I'm not sure, to be
That's
honest.
okay. So if anybody out there wants to watch it, it's a great description of really truly how our brain works and how it can
Yeah.
malfunction. As smart as our brain is, sometimes it's just not always there, right? So think of a timeline, and this happy memory is so good and you're 4 and you're dancing around in your pretty little dress and all the things, right? And life feels grand. And then all of a sudden you find out your parents got divorced. So that happy memory on that same day is now convoluted with sadness. But then sadness decides, I'm just going to take this and what the happy memory that I was attached to in file, A, I'm going to take sadness. I'm going to put it way down here in file D. Well, now it's all convoluted and it's just misfiled. So all we're doing is targeting the memory, taking a negative cognition, replacing it with a positive one. So in that moment, it could have been, I was just so sad. And then taking the memory of like, I could only control what I could, and just shifting it to something a little bit more positive. Well, what happens is our body with a negative or a traumatic memory, it becomes overwhelmed. So our autonomic nervous system goes dysregulated. Now, you're as an adult and now your partner is fighting with you and now you always think it's going to end in divorce. Well, that's because you're stuck on a loop that has you did nothing wrong. It's just that little person back here is coming to the frontal cortex, activating the amygdala, which is like our fire alarm when it's activated. And all we're doing is shrinking it down. So think of HIIT training, like high intensity with periods of rest. So we activate the brain with the fast pace and we're triggering it, thinking of these triggered memories. And then I pause it. And I say, what are you thinking? What are you feeling right now? And they might be like, oh my God, this is awful. I feel this way. This is what I saw. But all of a sudden, I don't know why, but I jumped to this other memory of like a boyfriend in high school and he used to always yell at me. Well, that's two same emotions, two different memories, but now we're playing Pac-Man and we're cleaning it up. So now we're cleaning house. But every time I stop the machine, we deactivate and we shrink the amygdala down and it creates a pause. So what happens when we're triggered? We don't pause. We just blow through the red lights, right? So this is creating that calming sensation. Then we go to our safe space, which is a more slow paced, and we're not thinking of those memories. We're only redirecting to the positive. Like I feel blissful. Maybe you're sitting at the top of a beautiful mountain and you're overlooking that and you're calming the amygdala, shrinking that back down. So eventually what happens is I'm not Men in Black. I can't go like this and make the world disappear. I'd probably be a very wealthy woman if that were the case. But what we can do is soften that. So it's softening it. So are you going to get a little of an uptick of energy sometimes? Yeah, probably. But you're not overwhelmed or consumed. So you're not going to explode or you're not going to be, continue that same trigger. Now, if you're reintroduced to the same trigger a lot, like a lot of my first responders, they get introduced to certain things a lot. If the trigger resorted there, because a lot of times it never resorted from the job. It resorted from the 40 plus years of traumatic things that happened that fueled the fire of the job. That's where a big misconception is when it comes to trauma. Because they think it's from the job. And sometimes it is. But many times it's a compilation of a lot of things.
And if trauma means wound and it's unresolved, that means it's still there. And you put pressure on that, on a wound, it hurts, right?
Absolutely.
So for me, when I was an alcoholic, I drank for relief. Not so much for pleasure, but for escape.
Yeah.
But when I had my awakening, I felt like a lot of stuff went away, and I started to learn how to live on a spiritual basis. And I did inner work. I started to learn how to look at things from an entirely different angle. And, Wayne Dyer always says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I started to integrate stuff, have better understanding. And, I just didn't know any better. And I felt a healing process through that awareness, the light of awareness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People come to me and they'll be like, but I did all this shadow work and I did all these things. And I'm like, and they're like, why am I still having this? And some people will only do the shadow work and that's enough for them. And they don't need the EMDR aspect. That's the beauty of all these different modalities that are out there when we have these awakenings is that, every part of it plays a role. And so I tell people if they did the shadow work and now they're coming to me for like EMDR and they did have this awakening, that's going to make the EMDR that much more beneficial and impactful because they're already there. They're now aware of what those triggers are. If we're trying to pick apart the trigger, it's like a necklace that's all tangled up, right? And we're trying to pick all of that apart. Then we get to the nitty gritty of it. You know, every bit of it is powerful.
I love that. And I've heard you mention Pain Body. I remember one time I was in Ohio watching a Tupac at the movies, and I was watching a Tupac movie, and Tupac dies at the end. But at the end of the movie, for 3.5 hours, I had tears coming down my eyes, and I wasn't sobbing, but it was just, they were coming down silently, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I felt, Eckhart Tolle talks about pain body, and I felt like all that stored pain that was inside of me from the streets, living that lifestyle, seeing friends get murdered, shot in the head, and all that stuff. Um, like not just my own, but my friends that I grew up with are no longer here. I felt like that was all of a collective,
Mhm.
friendship and pain that I was coming out of me, and I felt like a healing process. It was really weird. I didn't never even expected that.
No, I imagine so. And tears are such a beautiful release. And it's interesting because if you study tears, if you study happy tears, tears of pain, tears of sadness, they all have different chemical makeup, so to speak. And it's really, they are such a beautiful thing because there's a lot that we hold in, but also when we talk about the pain body is I'll have to ask you, like during that part of that movie, what was going on during the movie as the tears started to fall?
It brought me back to those times and those memories and experiences. And Tupac wasn't the only one that died. I had so many friends that got murdered in the same kind of way. Yeah, it was really hard.
So, the reason I ask that is because in that movie, at that moment, when we activate the pain body, when I do mediumship, they will affect my pain body. And it may be that in that moment of where Tupac was in that time frame, you could very well have been tapping into his energy along with the energy of everything that you experienced. And he
Mhm.
may have been feeling that sense of pain and all of those things from the other side. And now you're getting to release that not only for you and for the people that have crossed, but also him too. And so sometimes he may have been feeling that in that moment. And I've been in the
Yeah.
middle of mediumship and all of a sudden I start crying or I'll start like my heart will really hurt. Or recently I had somebody that was like their kidneys were affected and my back was just in so much pain. But I knew it wasn't like my pain and they'll distinguish that. But that took a little bit of wondering and knowing. Also, we can store energetically emotional pain within organs in our body. So it's good to have that release.
I love that, and I appreciate you, bringing that up because that just shows our connectedness, our interconnectedness, like, we're not separate from each other, right?
Mm.
But at times, like, I've gotten to realize as I learned how to live on a spiritual basis through, like, this 12-step program, and then I kinda moved on and just learned how to live it on a daily basis without, needing the 12-step the meetings anymore. Um, my intuition enhanced. I feel more like I feel empathy more, my,
Mhm.
compassion, but the problem with that is I feel like I can pick up on people, and sometimes it's not my energy, and I started to realize that by talking to people like yourself, but that's still it's kinda hard to differentiate the difference between what's mine and what's not. Do you
Mhm.
have any practices for people that to let them know that this is Tupac's, not mine? You
Right?
know?
Yeah, and it took me a long time to learn that, and I'm still learning it. I mean, things
Yeah.
evolve and we evolve and the way that spirit taps in evolves and so, some people do different techniques. Like, so I did recently, I've always known about Reiki and stuff, but I recently actually because I usually feel like the discomfort in my gut typically, probably why I have Crohn's disease. But, I learned this technique with Reiki, and they go across themselves 3 times like that, and it go right across my belly button when I do that, and it really does alleviate a lot of that. But I'll also tap in with myself. I'll be like, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Or if the person is in front of me and I'm picking up their energetically what's going on, like, let's say it's somebody I don't know. Let's say I'm at Publix supermarket here in Florida and I walk in and I just walk by this person and I'm like, ooh, and I'll ask myself, or maybe I experience it or I see it. Like maybe there's two people in a disagreement, but I can pick up on it. And now I'm feeling tense right here. I'm in it. I stop myself and I say, okay, obviously I was here. I was supposed to feel this. what in my life am I either resisting, and that's why I'm feeling it, and that's why I'm present to be seeing this, and how am I going to process through that?
Hmm.
And then I take it further because then I think like, okay, well, is this because this is something else I need to learn for my own practice? Both within as well as externally in my, mental health practice. But I really do a lot of things for self too. Like, how do we transmute that energy? That's I think, the most important thing is like when we take on something, how are we going to transmute it?
Hmm.
So if I have a heavy day, let's say all the patients of the day were just heavy clients that were like, you had a lot of stuff, right? I'm such an empath. So I always tell people practice with hugging. This is the easiest way to do it. So when we practice hugging, we tend to give away a lot of ourself, right? We're giving away energy. We're exchanging an energy, right? So I always tell people like practice hugging in a different way. So when we hug, we're like, ooh, let's go heart to heart. And I love it when people do that. I do. I think it's great. However, if you are going to hug heart to heart, make sure that you're not exchanging the heart to heart energy, especially if they're not happy in that moment. Like maybe they're going through a lot. Maybe they're high
Hmm.
anxiety, they're sobbing. Don't take that on. So sometimes it's not that I'm not giving any bit of my heart. Sometimes I won't hug heart to heart because it doesn't give as much energy exchange of my energy. It's not that I feel anything less for them. It's not anything. It's about protecting ourselves first. Or I tend to open up the top of my crown to source energy, pull the source energy in, and then give that space. Maybe they just come in for the hug and you're heart to heart and you're like, ah, and then pull the source energy in, push that energy towards them. You're giving them more healing energy than anything else, and you're not giving as much of you away.
Hmm. I appreciate that. That's
Or even
interesting.
grounding or doing things. I mean, it really is like I like to run. So for me, like that's my outlet. That is my meditation is going for a run. That transmutes that energy and it shifts the endorphins and all the things. So it's kind of like bridging the science and the spirit.
Do you believe we can bring in like past life trauma or other lifetime traumas, even ancestral, generational, and types of traumas that's not ours from this experience,
Mhm.
one
Oh,
experience?
100%. 100%. I'm literally living proof of that. Oh, no, because okay, so think of this, there's that term like poop rolls downhill. I'm saying
Yeah.
that nicely. Um, so there's that term, right? Because we come into this world and I'm a believer that there's things because of like deja vu moments or specific dreams that are shared dreams. My late husband and I had a lot of shared dreams of things that had happened in a time frame that was not this time frame. Um,
Mm.
we didn't even look the same in the other time frame, but we would have the same dreams on the same nights and wake up and it was just like like wild. And in every past life, he always died early. And even in this life, he passed early. And so it was like, wow, why are we repeating the same pattern? Right. And what do we need to heal in this lifetime, or what can we help each other heal, whether from the other side of the veil or from here, and both, right? I always say Mark and I heal each other and do and create healing
Mhm.
from both sides now anyways. And he was a complete non-believer of this stuff until the end. Um, but truly it really is, it's about that. I mean, that's what I think. That's my take on that, if that answered your question.
Oh, yeah. So you believe in soul contracts, like, you
Oh,
guys.
100%. Yeah. And I'll see that a lot of times in readings if we're doing like any kind of past life or there's something going on, even in the mental health aspect. Okay. Like if I see two couples and they're like fighting over something or, all of these things, it's like I'll look at that and sometimes I'll tap in if they're open to it. Maybe you were a dad in a past life and that freaks people out. Like, they're like, what? I'm with this partner and I'm intimate with this person. They were my dad. Like, but then I'm like, no, 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 look deeper into that because it really makes sense. Like, how are you guys interacting with one another? So, for instance, my son is like my husband is he's like, oh my God, he says Oedipus syndrome. He's like in love with his mom. He idolizes me and he's just like, oh, you're so beautiful, all those things. But we've also had a lot of the same dreams. And he's even come to me and said, Mom, like there'll be nobody better than you. He's like, because I know that I was like your partner in a past life. And the way that we interact with one another and not on a weird creepy
Yeah.
thing. But the way that we interact with each other, we do have that loving energy that's almost like that, right? But he also has a father energy. And we've also, through other mediums and psychics, have also seen him as a father figure to me, which makes a lot of sense because he's probably been a more of a role model in my lifetime of the male energy than anybody, really. So there's something really powerful to be said about that. But we can also bring in old contracts that are not so great. And that's where I'm going to go back to like the couples that are arguing. Like, is this something or a bad narcissistic relationship? We'll use that as an example. What were you guys doing in that past life? We got to look at that. Like, how do we heal that here so we don't continue this pattern or keep bringing it from past like energy into the next one and the next one? Because we don't want to do that. We definitely don't. And we can heal those things. I'm a believer that we can heal that. Whether it's us cutting that cord and cutting that, like, I tell people, they'll be like, oh, I don't have a relationship with this person in my life, but it brings me peace. And I'm like, if it brings you peace, I feel like you've healed something within that. But if
That's
you're
interesting.
altering it, then let's talk more about that.
That's interesting. You can also see that in the collective.
Mm-hmm.
Or like in America, for an example, you can see the same patterns being played over and over. Is that all for a reason as well, like a soul collective contract? Like,
I think so. I
yeah, that's
mean,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
We brought up pain body, but I've heard you talk about soul body and astral body. Is there different types of bodies we carry beyond
I
form?
feel that there is. The astral body too is kind of like otherworldly, right? So like when you tap in, like when I tap into like a different realm or a different frequency, I mean, granted, we're doing this with a brain frequency too. We have like alpha, beta, theta waves in different states we go in when we're in meditative states and whatnot, and sleep and REM. But in the astral world, we can do the astral travel. We can do all of that stuff. And just remembering to return to the soul body that we're in. And so when I say in the human form, and again, this is just my belief system, but this is my body, the casing, but the soul is kind of always out there, right? Like spirit's not above us or below us. They're like kind of always by our side. So it's like being able to jump from place to place. Right. So I think it was Bashar that I saw recently. He posted something about like, this is the afterlife.
Mm.
And that's where you return to like the soul form. And that's why we can connect, right? That's why we can channel, is because we can jump from that, like that soul body. And then we can astral travel to places. We can like, I tend to think like the way that I hear messages come in when I'm channeling is it's so quick. It's like quick, but then I slow down to speak, for it comes out. It's like I can have two different dialogues at the same time. And it's like jumping to like traveling here and coming back here, but it happens so fast.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And by working with so many people and their loved ones, do you find like specific thing that our loved ones want us to know when they move on?
Mhm. There's a lot of different things. One of the most impactful, I would have to say, is when you have somebody who doesn't necessarily want to talk to that loved one. And that loved one comes in hard and strong. And they're just like, why? I don't want to talk to that person. I didn't talk to him or her before they left. And then all of a sudden, they start to take accountability for their actions. And these aren't things that I would know, right? I don't know the people that come to, the events, but all of a sudden, let's say the dad was a drunk and he beat you up and all these things. And he's coming in. And of course, that's not somebody I would imagine that they want to, connect with. It's not their first choice. Maybe they wanted the loving grandmother to come in. And all of a sudden, dad starts telling me this. And then he starts telling me, hey, you know what? I'm taking accountability for all these things. And I've seen them in my mind there. Like I always say, it's like a movie screen of them like beating them as kids. It's not fun to see those things, but they'll be like, this is what I did. And that's what the point where I'll ask them, like, may I speak freely about what this person, and when they do say yes to that, I honor that. And I tell them, dad wants to take accountability for this.
Yeah.
He is doing the work, or he is doing this, or, hey, when that happened, he was able to be there for you. Like, let's say they almost got into a car wreck, which could have been horrible. And he tells me about that moment that I wouldn't know about, where he was able to be there to make sure that they were protected because he never knew how to do it when he was in the physical form. And that I feel like is what really changes people's lives. Like it changes
Mm.
my life to be
Yeah.
able to do that for somebody because I see that like, whoa, I never would have thought that. And I've had a couple people come back and say, you know what, I never had a relationship with dad or mom or brother or whatever it is, and now I do. And
Mm.
they look for them and they start to see the signs and they start to have a different level of healing from that they never got to necessarily have when the person was physically here. And it's just, I don't know, those are the ones that really like they definitely hit me hard in a good way, but yeah.
Do you feel like that's, like, similar to, like, tapping into someone's life review?
Mhm.
You hear about near-death experiencers that experience this life review, and I kinda related to when I went through the 12 steps, I started to, like, put the person on stage that I had some problem with
Mhm.
mentally and emotionally, like a resentment, and then replay it all and see where I was hurt or threatened, what I could did better and stuff like that, just looking at it from a entirely different point
Mhm.
of view. But by doing that, I developed not just understanding, but more compassion and more love for the human condition.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. For sure. No, absolutely. I always, there's even things within our own lives, that I've experienced that we hang on to, and then all of a sudden we get to have that sense of acknowledgement. That's our ability to change in that moment, right? Because we're now made aware of it. That's like when like I would say mirrors, like when people like tend to mirror people or they bring it
yeah,
to the attention, like those are those moments that they're so impactful and so life changing. I mean, it's amazing to me.
yeah, I love that. And could that change our gene expression? Because like I love talking about like and learning about by some great minds like yourself, how like trapped emotions and trauma can affect and create disease later down the line. And
Mhm.
with memories, I've heard you even share this, is always paired with emotions. And how does that affect our body if we don't do that inner work?
Mhm. So it's interesting. Not I mean, I just use myself as an example because it's just easier because I also
Yeah.
can't share too much about other people, like, with what I do, but, so I have Crohn's disease. I'm a cancer survivor, colon cancer survivor, and I look at my lifetimes, right? And I've looked at the lifetimes that I've been able to tap into. I look at the trauma that I've experienced in young adult life, and in that young adult life, the Crohn's was actually much worse.
Mm,
And then, and whenever we have something that affects our, like, when we're going through stress, it's going to affect our immune system. It's going to, increase cortisol and all of these things, which are going to actively change things within us. Right. And then, that alone, any kind of inflammatory responses that happen with trauma, and we can carry that even in the womb, like let's say mom is going through something really traumatic and she's carrying that energy from childhood. Now you're in the womb and then more traumatic things are happening. Womb trauma is real. And then now you're out into this world and everything is active. And sometimes it's yours and sometimes I don't want to say it's not because it becomes like yours in a sense for yours to help process. So, yes, I absolutely see those things shift and change. It's no different than if you have like a scab and you're picking at it and then you let it kind of heal and then all of a sudden something activates it again. Maybe you bump into something and it changes it, but it changes things at that cellular level. So internally, externally, it's all going to be affected by that. Um, I've seen people, they even say with cancers, right? That things shift and they change and you realize, oh my gosh, this person went through so much trauma and then all of a sudden now they have cancer. Well, it makes sense that there's, things that are going to shift and change. But I also think breaking cycles
mm.
can change gene mutation and DNA and all that stuff over time. Not just because we're co-creating with other people, but and I think that plays a really big role in it and energetically even in breaking cycles. But also sometimes the people that go through the hardest stuff are the ones that are they break those chains, which actually stops a lot of different things from happening further down the line, right? So like I always say that like yeah, the parts of me that were like cut out literally, I feel like maybe that was part of the breaking of that chain. and it's not going to continue down that next cycle. And it's like me calming that is now calming my children, right? And that hopefully will keep going, and that changes that whole mutate. Maybe it changes mutations. Maybe at a DNA level. I think a lot of things affect it though. Also, like our environmentally, um,
Mhm.
even just environmentally, I mean by like even our parents, like I was saying before, like what they bring in, and then how they bring us in, and how we decide to process those things.
Yeah, I love that. Dr. Bruce Limpton talks about how living in love versus living in fear have different effects on the mind and body. And then I look at that and look at my life, my relationship with my environment, how that affected me, these experiences. Today I know my parents did the best they could with what they knew. If they would have known better, they would have done better. I don't blame them or speak victimese anymore.
Yeah,
It's just part of the experience, and
I
but
love
yeah,
that.
it's
I'm
changed me.
using that too.
Well, I always tell people when I got sober, I didn't my first language wasn't English or Spanish, it was Victimese. I blamed everyone else but me. I couldn't even look at myself, and I had to
Yeah.
look they taught me how to look within and take
Mhm.
responsibility for my life, my actions and
Yeah.
experiences. Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. I am, and I've even seen that where it's like, you know, in my relationship that I'm in now, I always tease that, we both came into this and it was a lot of victimies on both ends. And when we come to the realization of we find out, and it's brought to our attention, we tend to go into victim mode, right? And then all of a sudden you learn so much from these things, and then you're sitting there looking back going, wow, I did bring a lot of this into this too. And I think it's really important that when we get to acknowledge that, our autonomic nervous system calms and we calm, and then we can regulate on our own, that a lot of times we don't look outside of ourselves for that validation and for that like comfort. And it's always nice to have that, but when are we going to learn how to fill our own joy bucket? you know Once we learn that, it's pretty great. Pretty great stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and, like, I don't know, I've caught myself a number of times, like, where the mind wants to blame someone else instead of taking responsibility
Yeah.
for the action or mistake, you know?
Well, like
It
in Buddhism, right? Where they were like, you can only trigger yourself. So,
Mhm.
and there's something to be said about that. There really is.
I appreciate that. Some of the entities or spirits that you tap in, can that be other non-human, like, be, like, galactic, like,
Mhm.
extraterrestrial as well? Do you believe that we don't just come in as humans, we also have other lives as other types of beings?
Yeah, and that was really hard for me to get tapped into until, act believe it or not, more recently. I don't remember which eclipse it was. It was a couple years ago. There's a big eclipse, and in Florida it got a little dark, but not anything. But in New York, it was like black, right? It was like it looked like I remember my friend telling me like the birds stopped chirping, and it was just like weird, right? But that was the first time I really truly felt that energy. Now I always tap into it, and in readings it would come out. So like I would be meeting with somebody and be like, they're not from here, like they're just not, and they would tell me like the planet name, or they would or they would say like, oh, dad was from the Palladian, or and it was wild to me, but I never quite got it until that one day, and I was sitting in my side yard during this eclipse, and something said, I left work early that day. I was like, I just need to be outside. Something kept saying, you need to be outside. And I sat there out in the yard, and all of a sudden I felt something, like, and I felt like I wasn't here even though I was here. Like I could feel myself in the chair. I do that. And then all of a sudden I felt like something from, and I kid you not, they were like these long fingers, and they were just like doing this, but not even like they were like touching me, but not much, just kind of doing this. And it was almost like this download that came over me. And it was just like, hey, we are here. And it was like, there was a little bit of thanking, there was a little bit of like uncomfortable, like a feeling, only because like, in the human form we feel uncomfortable because it's like I'm not used to that. Like what is that? But it was also a curiosity. And it was this acknowledgement, and recently I have been looking up more, and a dear friend of mine is very tapped into like UFOs and all of that, and he's actually like like shown me like the difference. It's like, look, this is real. And I'm like, it's a plane, but no, but mostly during readings. It's mostly where that happens the most. Now I'm totally open to more of it. I'm just in my yes phase where I'm just like, yeah, like I want to know all the things because I want to be a sponge to that, because if that helps humanity here, then I want to know about it.
Mm.
I want to be able to share that, experience if it's meant for that person to be shared. If it's only if it's for their like greater good.
Do you believe we're all starseeds or
Mm.
only certain individuals?
That's a great question that I honestly don't know. Because I do feel a lot of us have been here before, but then I also know that I've met little beings that, don't really have that energy and they're just as magical. But I can't believe that with the skies that we have and how great they are, that we're like the only ones here and that we haven't been somewhere else before and exploring everywhere in just different forms. And I feel like there's so much like knowledge base and little knowledge would be useless, right? So I don't know. I meet some people that are very young beings that you can definitely tell have been here. And then when they want to share their story and they're just so petrified of it because they're like, people are going to judge. They're going to think they're crazy. They're going to, and it's like, no, I'm not here to do that. I'm here to listen.
I love that. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember watching Indiana Jones, like, I know that environment. Or those kung fu movies on the weekends on regular TV, and like, I've been there before.
Yeah.
Even Star Trek or Star Wars, I remember watching those like, I've been there before. Like
Yeah.
there was something, it seemed too familiar. It's like an inner
Mhm.
knowing that I've
Mhm.
been in that type of environment before
Oh,
or
yeah.
experience, which is pretty
Oh,
interesting. Yeah.
for
But
sure, there's lots of deja vus. I'll tell you, there's lots of experiences, even here on in the Earth place where I've been somewhere, and I'm like, and I go right back to that place in my mind in real time, and it's like, wow,
yeah, it's interesting. But then we get conditioned, go through our experiences, traumatic experiences, and
yep,
yeah, it just yeah.
we get stamped with human. No.
Yeah, yeah. You brought up cold cases earlier. What was it like bringing up working on cold cases? How'd you get to do that?
Well, funny enough, it was actually the first time was accidental. Oh, well, maybe. Nothing's accidental, right? I was actually a friend of mine's dad was a cop, and we were just talking about something that had happened in our town in upstate New York, or just outside of our town. And he overheard us. We were in the bedroom, and I was just like, and she knew, and we were both intuitive, and we would sit there and we're like, let's try to like tap and figure it out. And he overheard us. And so, he was a non-believer and never liked us talking about that stuff. He almost didn't want her hanging out with me. Like it was just, I don't know. We used to influence each other. And now we're still best friends and we're like, 40 years later. But he went and he took it and started diving into it and was like, but then we got scared because he started questioning. And he was like, well, how do you know that? Because it was something that happened in like a time frame where I would have been young, but I wouldn't have been able to achieve doing what this person did. And so it was about tapping into all of that, and it was scary. And at first, it was really scary because I would, I was always worried, like, are they going to think I was involved in this? And then I started seeing like the positives that could come of it. But it also taught me a really valuable lesson, is that most of the times when you help with cold cases, it's not admissible in court. You can't bring a psychic medium to the stage and be like, hey, on this day, what did you now? And I don't remember a lot of my readings because they're not really my knowledge, right? So it is hard. When I'm tapped in, I got to record that and do that for them because I'm not going to remember. And so when I do that, it was always a little fear-based initially, a lot of fear-based. Even still, there's a little mini fear-based, but I'm really well protected. But there's, is somebody going to come after me because now they're pissed that, pardon my French, but, that I went and I solved this, right? It can be definitely like, it was scary doing it. Now I look at it as very rewarding because it gives people a lot of closure. But with that, you don't always get the thank yous and you don't get that gratitude for it. Okay. And that's the valuable lesson, is that sometimes you should just do something and know that, that was the gift. You don't have to
Mm.
get the validation behind it. You don't have to get that, hey, you know what? Thanks for doing that. Thanks for taking your energy and extending your energy to do that. You don't need that. I really don't. And initially I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm tapping in and I'm doing all these things, right? And it's just like, what am I going to get out of this, right? And you think that, and then you're like, realize that no, you already got something out of it, because you got to see that, like, wow, that was found, or that person was found, or, unfortunately, I only tend to be able to find when the person is deceased. So that was also hard, because it was like they were looking for somebody and they just said, well, can you look? And I was like, sure, I'll tap in if I can. And I didn't have a lot of success in doing that. But that was just because maybe that's not what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just here to do the other stuff, and I'm okay with that. It was interesting to actually, in your area, I don't know if you heard about that, where they were looking for somebody who had been hiking, a younger male, and I kept seeing like a bear and a doe, and I guess they had just cleared Bear Mountain, and then I kept seeing him
Oh,
standing behind the doe, and I said to the lady that happened to be at this event, who's like part of the search party, and I said, you're not going to find him on foot. I said, you're going to need like drones. I said, he's on the backside of this thing, but I said, I don't know why. I see a deer, a doe, and I said, I don't know what to tell you. She goes, tomorrow we're searching Doe Mountain. And she goes, we just cleared Bear Mountain today. And I said, yeah, you'll find him there. I said, there's like a ledge. You're going to find him there. I said, he keeps telling me he cracked his neck. He fell. He wasn't a good climber is what he keeps telling me. Well, the next day in the paper, his brother had written in there that he wasn't a good climber and all the things. And I went to go for coffee, and I look up and I see a helicopter go over. And I can't remember the kid's name now, but like I remember hearing his name. And I heard they found me. And then this lady calls me and is just like, oh my gosh, like they found him right where you said. And I was just like,
wow.
wow. But to me, that mother had also lost a child not that long, like a month or two or something like that, or 2 years. I don't remember. It's two something right before that. So imagine how like hurt she must have been, but yet in the same respect, the closure of knowing that they actually found him. So there is some sort of closure, even as hard as that is. And to me, that was like, wow.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that,
Yes, thank
bringing that
you.
family closure. So, um,
Yeah.
I just recently lost two of my grandfathers, and they were both quite the opposite. One, and I got to thank both of them. One was completely unconditional love,
Hmm.
and the other one was completely angry, resentful, and I feel like he projected his stuff onto me. And I
Hmm.
actually lived his life in my own way. I went from a young gangbanger to him being a zoot suiter, in his day, and I think he projected that stuff onto me and kind of hated me for it. But I
Yeah.
gotta thank him for both roles. They could win a Emmy award.
Amen to that. Amen to that. They do. They show up, and we can mirror them in the way that we are, and then we can learn so much from what they've shown us of what we don't choose to be anymore. You know?
Yeah.
It's really, yeah, he just kept hearing the word badass. He was
Yeah.
like, I was such a badass. Like that's how he like thought about it, but not always in the best way. Yeah. Yeah. Well, did he have lots of tattoos too?
No, my dad did. My
Dad
dad had a
did?
lot of
Okay.
tattoos,
Because
yeah.
I'm seeing somebody that wants to come through that has lots and lots of tattoos. That was just, but I also feel like like a loving energy though. I do feel a loving energy coming from this person.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
if he was loving when he was here or not, but he's definitely very, very loving energy. But I'm also picking up, man, I don't know which, there's a lot of males. You have a lot of
Yeah.
males on the other side, my friend. But there's also somebody, was dad intubated before he passed? Like, or something happened to his throat before he passed?
No, my dad fell off a cliff. Maybe,
Dad fell off a
yeah,
cliff. Okay,
yeah.
this person that's coming through, something happened to their throat, but I feel like they were intubated. Like they didn't pass
Huh.
right away. Okay. But this is definitely a male, but this person also has a lot of tattoos. And I know that's very broad, but they were saying, no, this person's younger. This person's younger. Dad says he feels he died young too, but like younger than he would. He's like, I didn't like past in my 80s or anything. It's
Yeah.
like, but this person's young, but he was like intubated first. He keeps showing me that. I hate to ask you this if I may though, and then I may have to go because I have
Yeah.
patients. But I'm also seeing somebody, and this is very graphic if I may, but somebody who was shot execution style. It
Huh.
wants to come forward, like point blank right here. Okay, this person wants to come through. I'm also seeing the number 20. Either they were 20 or they were in their 20s when this happened. Okay. And he's kind of giggling because he said there was a lot of us that kind of went that way. But he said this is also somebody who is very, very, there was 4. I feel like you guys hung out in a pattern of 4, or there were 4 of you that were always together.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something I'm gonna have to think about because, you know, I've had a lot of friends that were murdered like that, growing
Okay.
up,
And that's probably
a
why he
number
said
of
it,
them.
because he was like, there was a lot of us that ended up going this way. And I also have T like Tom. There's also a T, somebody with, I feel like this is Tom, but I can't gather it real, like this is just on a whim because I'm not super tapped in right now. But I am seeing that T. Like yeah, there's a TJ or Tom. There's also like a TJ and a Tom.
I'm gonna have to
So
rewatch
think of
this
the
again,
first
but
and last name when you think back to it, because TJ may not be TJ. It could be like the T and the J name or something like that's like that, because I keep seeing T and then J, T and then J. But they showed it to me 3 times, which is usually a definite to a name.
yeah, it's hard for me to remember a lot of the stuff that went on until I really reflect on it, so I'm gonna have to
Of
really do
course.
some reflections for it to come to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's totally. I always tease that it's like being at the doctor's office and then we forget everything we need.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'll get a text message that'll be like, you said this. And I'm like, cool, I don't remember. Yeah. That's so crazy. That's so
No,
cool.
no, but I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here. It's been lovely talking with you.
Yeah, thank you, and, I'll see you at the expo. I'll
I know.
definitely
I
see you
can't
at the
wait.
expo.
I'm so excited. I'll see you in
Yeah.
just a few weeks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna end it with the Carl Sagan quote, and he says, "Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it's hyperfun of spirituality." So thanks
Mm,
for coming on.
that. Thank you. Thank you. It's great to know you.
Yeah, good knowing you. Namastizzle.
Namaste.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on the day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.